Welcome to the Insight Makers segment of the System Thinking Certification Program. I can tell from the models that people have been posting for the last few days that the learning is, in some places, for some people, steeper than others, though it's apparent that people are making real progress in terms of getting more and more comfortable with Insight Maker. So today, I'd like to do just a little bit of housekeeping and then talk about Insight Maker a little bit. We'll do some Q&A on Insight Maker. Then Scott Fortmann-Roe, the developer of Insight Maker, is going to show up in about 30 minutes, and he's going to talk for 15 minutes, and then we'll have another 15 minutes of Q&A. Monday, I sent out the first news update for the certification program using MailChimp. There are enough people registered for this program so that it has gotten difficult to send out the notices from Gmail. Gmail gets really disturbed if I send out too many email messages in a day. And I'm sorry that I messed the first one up because I'm still figuring out how to use it, but I got over that hump so that I intend to send them out every Sunday, and I will try and put in them, here's the content that you ought to be looking at for this week, and here are the sessions that are scheduled for this week, and any miscellaneous Q&A that are really good questions that people ask that I think that a lot of people would want to know the answers to. So, and I'll try to keep it short to about one page so it's not overwhelming. I will try and get that out every Sunday. It's sort of a tickler to say, you know, you're supposed to be working on this stuff sometime. So in terms of the one update that I'd like to be sure you're aware of, in last week's sessions, I tried to demo the permalinks, and I found out that they were actually broken. So the developers really got on the stick and fixed them last Friday. I think, yeah, last Friday, so that they do now work. So that if you're in the middle of one of these segments, if you're working on Web of Wonder and you happen to be on this segment and you know that you want to go to this one next, but you need, I mean, that's all you can do at the moment. If you click on it, on the bottom of every page, there is a permalink. If you click on the permalink and drag it to your bookmarks bar, it will create a link, and that link will take you back to that element. The URL here is also something that you can bookmark, though the developers created the permalinks, which will remain valid even if I change the labels on the elements. If you are not logged into Kumu and click on permalink, it will take you to the login. So you have to log in and then click on permalink, and it will take you to the element within the model that you want to get to. And I find it very useful because there's so much content in here, just to make it easy to get back to the place where I left. Now, I had said that the intent was that if you're looking at this whole map, to select the segment that you want to work on, come down here and do focus selected, which will then make sure that the only thing that's displayed is that segment of all of the content that's associated with the link that you are interested in. And you can scan or mouse in and out depending upon, I mean, usually you work in a screen larger than this, but I purposely made it small because there are probably some people attending this session on notebooks, and I didn't want to make it too big. The part that I had forgotten about is that if you look at any element, there's a label that shows up here. What it is it's actually a tag. Every one of the elements that's part of the systems thinking segment has a tag. So that if I was looking at everything, if I just click in the background, it takes me back to everything. If I happen to be looking at one of the systems thinking elements, and I click on that tag, it selects all of the elements with the same tag so that I could also do a focus and get back to there. So that there's actually two ways that you can now get to the set of content that's all related. And this approach works good in conjunction with the permalink, because permalink takes you to an element, and then the tag will select all of the content that's part of that segment, and you can simply do a focus, and then that's all you have to worry about is the content that's associated with that segment. So I hope this has been clearer than it has been confusing, and if it has been confusing, post a question and we'll do it some more. So the intent of this particular segment was...
Before you go on?
Yes.
Excuse me. Michael wants to know if you were planning to make any pre- and post-tests available for the modules.
In each one of the modules, there are, in the final segment of it, there is an assignment that asks people to develop some things that are associated with, or to develop them, you have to have understood the content that you did in this segment and post your answers to the discussion thread for that segment. It's not a test. It's exercises that provide an opportunity for you to do the things that, or use the things you should have learned in that segment and post them for feedback, so that if there are some people who are wrestling with certain aspects of Insight Maker, and they have been posting their models and revisions, and they get commented on, and they work on them some more, and some people seem to have gotten it pretty much mostly figured out. It's not a test. There's only one test. Somebody asked me today about certification. I went and added the certification segment to this, and the certification segment is pretty straightforward. In segment 6, I think it is, you learn about the whole enabling a better tomorrow sequence of activities to evaluate and figure out how to deal with a situation. And that is then reinforced with an example the following week and the week after that. The certification is for you to take a real live situation that you're passionate about and apply all of the things that you have learned to develop an understanding of what's relevant or associated with that situation, and then an approach for dealing with it, and demonstrate that you understand the concepts and how to apply them. And I told somebody this morning that you could sign up for this program today and do the certification assignment tonight and get certified tomorrow. All you have to do is demonstrate that you understand the concepts and can apply them in a real situation. So all of the rest of the exercises are simply skill building or helping to develop understanding to get to a point of doing the final exercise. So does that take care of it, Michael? Okay, where was I? So that the idea for, I hope you're all making out pretty well with the fact that the content that you reviewed last week is what gets covered in the web sessions on Tuesday and Thursday while you're reviewing the content for next week's webinars. I expect it's probably more than slightly confusing, but it's the web sessions are meant to be reviews. Oh, I'm pressing the B key in case I hadn't told you before that it's B is for bounce. If the Kumu is doing the layout, and if it isn't, if it's messed up, just hit the B key and it'll sort of move it around, jiggle it, and sort it out. The intent of this week's session was to begin to get familiar with how models are created in Insight Maker, being that in the Web of Wonder and Systems Thinking segments, you interacted with a lot of models that were created in Insight Maker. Though not expecting you to become an expert using Insight Maker, because it's actually a extremely capable and deep environment in terms of what one can do with it. So the idea was to start off with the things that were rather easy to develop, which the first one being rich pictures, because you only have to use a couple of elements of Insight Maker to develop them, and then causal loop diagrams, which are a bit more well-defined in terms of how they're supposed to be constructed, and then some exposure to stock and flow diagrams, enough so that you could probably develop a relatively straightforward, simple simulation, though you're just scratching the surface. In all of the exercises after the Insight Maker segment, the only thing that you will really need are rich pictures and causal loop diagrams. I don't expect that to do any of the things following this segment. You absolutely have to do a simulation model unless you choose to. So in terms of the thing that I was most excited about with Insight Maker, sort of by accident, Scott Fortmann-Roe and I ran into each other in the fall of 2009, and he was working on this concept. I sort of asked the question, when was somebody going to develop a web-based environment that made it real easy for us to develop models and share them? And I essentially got a message from him that said, boy, have I got a deal for you. And he and I have been working together for the last 4.5 years because he believed that it needed to exist, and I agreed with that, though I don't know how to do any of the coding, but I developed a lot of models and was in a position to provide a lot of feedback about here are things that would be useful in the environment to do things. And he has been very good about not overcomplicating the environment. Engineers love to engineer things, and if you simply allow them to continue to add features and functions, they add stuff that might be nice to have, though things that may rarely ever get used. And he hasn't done that. So that the things that are here will end up being used very extensively. Though because it's a web environment, once you develop a model, whether it's a rich picture, a causal loop diagram, or a simulation model, to share it with someone else, all you have to do is send them the URL. Now, when they receive it, they won't see all of this. All they'll see is a couple of tools at the top, because the model doesn't belong to them and they can't change it. Though any model in Insight Maker that you can see, you can, where is it? Uh-oh. Why is that not here? Oh, because this I haven't saved this yet. If I go find more insights and I go look at the new insights, this is stuff that's been developed by people, 19 seconds ago, 37 seconds ago. And I say, oh, this is really interesting. So I open this model that Igor created, and I look at it, and I say, oh, well. But I really want to actually take this and do something with it. I can click on Clone Insight, and I can create a copy of this model that belongs to me and I can do anything that I want to with it, with my copy of it. And I haven't touched his at all. So what it does is it simply makes it extremely easy to develop and share models with other people and present them in a way so that people can build on what other people have done quite easily. And this is it. I mean, you're in a single environment. Everything happens here. There are a couple of windows that pop in terms of on top of this. What am I doing? Though you actually don't ever really go someplace else. Everything that you create is created in this environment. And I'm just extremely pleased with what Scott has developed. So based upon your experience with it for the past week or so, are there some questions that I can answer about some things that you're stumbling with, something relatively easy? In other words, when you ask questions here in the web sessions, I have about 5 seconds to think about them before I give you an answer. And there are people who often have very meaningful questions that I have to think about for a while before I can provide a good answer, and those it's appropriate to post on the discussion thread. I mean, somebody previously has posted a question that I thought about for a whole day before I was comfortable providing an answer, because it was a really good question, and it warranted thought before I responded. So. And also, the Insight Maker User's Guide, which is, I don't know, probably in the first one here. Yeah, there's a reference to it here. The Insight Maker User's Guide is also developed in Kumu. There's some user information inside of Insight Maker itself, though within this context, there is a video for practically every feature or function in Insight Maker, so that you can come here, and if you're interested in storytelling, you can search for story and then open it. And here's a video that describes storytelling and the API and how you go about developing stories in Insight Maker. So it's just probably a good thing to bookmark. All right. We got a question or two? Couldn't have been that clear.
No questions.
Oh, yeah, Jim has. I said.
Oh wait, yeah, there is one.
Yeah, we had talked about developing a course on Insight Maker itself, and I think it's still appropriate to do that, though it's probably not going to happen until it's not going to be available until the September timeframe. I think things with this program should sort of slow down in July and August, and I don't want to ruin anybody's summer by having a course during summer. So, except my summer, because I have to work on developing it in July and August. So what I'm thinking about is doing a 6-week or a 6-segment program on modeling and simulation with Insight Maker that's laid out the same as this, only it's in 6 segments, and we'll do it the same way. And I've been thinking that about $99 is a reasonable price for 6 segments, or whatever you feel is appropriate. And if you have thoughts about what it ought to contain or your concerns, send them to me, and I'll take them into account. But hopefully, along around the September timeframe, there'll be a modeling and simulation with the Insight Maker program available. Though this program, based upon what happened after we initially announced it, this program never stops. It's just going to, I mean, we had a couple of people sign up the other day, and it's just going to continue to cycle indefinitely. And you signed up for this program, you have access to the content, and you will have access to the content indefinitely for as long as you want. At some point, you probably will get tired of following the discussion threads, and you'll go there and you'll turn them off, though the content will continue to evolve as the material is reviewed and represented over and over again, and you will continue to have access to the content indefinitely.
Gene, there's another question.
Okay.
Another Michael is asking, or actually he says, it seems to me that being clear about the problem before starting to model is essential, but it's still hard to get started. And he wants to know if you have any guidance on what sort of things to focus on.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Michael, even after doing this for a long time, that I still find that the case. At one point in time, the worst thing that, or the thing that I dreaded most, was beginning with a blank sheet of paper, because I was always so worried about actually getting it right, and I wanted to start in the right place. And finally, I realized that it's all connected, so it doesn't matter where you start. Just do it. You know, think Nike. Just draw something. Connect the pieces together, and don't worry about getting it right to begin with. Simply begin to develop the relationships and the model, and as you do it over and over again, which I still continue to do, you begin to understand, well, all right, from what I understand at the moment, I should present this loop first, which then promotes this loop, and then this loop. The thing that I offered someplace along the way about the parallel, the connection that I made between a model and a play, where a play is a set of actors, and it's a story that's presented in a number of acts, and it's the relationship or interactions between the actors in the act. And some of the actors appear in multiple acts, though it's unfolded piece by piece, and the whole thing holds together and tells a story. When you finally figure out all of the pieces that are related in the model, and you get to a point of understanding that you were seeking, you then have a sense of how to unfold that model segment by segment or loop by loop, so that the model itself tells a story. I think there's some place in there that there's a copy of Aesop's Fable, the boy who cried wolf. It's probably one of the best ones in there in terms of really unfolding a story from here's a loop about the boy is tending sheep, and he's bored, and he doesn't want to be bored, so he cries wolf because the townspeople come running, and he'll be the center of attention, and that's the place that it starts. But then there are other pieces associated with it based upon what happens when he cries wolf, is if there is a wolf and if there isn't a wolf, and it has an impact on what happens, so that unfolds as a story, though I probably redrew that 4 or 5 times before I got to a point where I was comfortable with it. And then 6 months later, I found out one of the loops was wrong, and I had to fix it. And it's I tell people that it's a dance between me and the model, and that I try to explain what I think, and then because it doesn't come out right, it's apparent that I haven't got my thoughts sorted out, and I just have to continue to think about it. I mean, if I can't express what I think, then I probably don't understand what I think. And it's the process of forcing myself to clarify my thoughts so that I can actually express it, that helps me better understand what I thought. And then when I go try to explain it to somebody else, and they ask all these questions that I never thought of, well, then I realize that I need to go back and work on it some more. And it's for me, the intent of a model is it's a simplification of reality intended to promote understanding. And to the extent to which it does that, it's a good model. And if it doesn't, then it's a model that needs to be worked on. So I hope that helped. No, Michael, it's not just you. Any others? Boy, this is amazing. Scott, you there? You want to start 5 minutes early? Oh, I have to turn Scott's mic on.
Hello?
Scott, are you there?
Hi, Gene. I am. How are you doing?
Yeah, it works better when I turn your mic on. Well, everyone, this is Scott Fortmann-Roe, the infamous creator of Insight Maker. Scott and I have actually been working together for 4.5 years. We wrote a book together, and I've never met him. It's amazing, but it worked out pretty good so far. And
Hey, Jane,
so,
excuse me.
yes.
Maybe before we introduce Scott, there was a late-breaking question from Mike Blackstone, who is referring to the business and its customer model, the last slide. He doesn't understand why the link between value and customer satisfaction is blue. He thinks it should be red.
Okay, so it starts with a reinforcing loop, and another reinforcing. In other words, businesses being what they are, they like success, so they begin to focus on doing things that promote their own success, as opposed to continuing to focus on their customers, which made them successful in the first place. And it is that focus on their own self-promotion that ends up decreasing the value that they create for the customer. And it's that decreasing that value then adds less to the customer satisfaction, which results in demand so that they go find lower price suppliers to actually balance out that customer sat that's not there. And that demand decreases the demand on the business itself, though what's really happening is that there's a balancing loop that happens so that the business promoting its own success subtracts from the value that it adds to the customer, the value that it creates. So it adds less value to the customer, and the customer sat ends up adding to in other words, because this subtracts from the customer satisfaction declining, causes it to create more demand on the other organization, which creates less demand on the business, which adds less to the demand on the business itself, so the business begins to decline. Now, I don't understand why the link between value and customer sat is blue. Oh,
Is this a case where
this link right here, okay?
yeah, where S's and O's make more sense?
Well, this is one of the things where people who spent any time with the S and O model of Sengi's, it doesn't wash in a lot of context, especially when you're dealing with stocks. So that customer sat is something that develops, it accumulates, so that the value that you offer to the customer adds to the customer satisfaction. If you create less value, it still contributes to customer satisfaction, though not as much. This is not an opposite relationship, so that if value goes up, customer satisfaction goes up, and if value goes down, customer satisfaction. Actually, Mike, maybe I got it wrong. Let me go think about this some more. Okay, this is what happens. Good question, Mike. I'll get back to you on this.
You know what? I'll take advantage. I'm
Huh?
taking advantage of having a mic. I thought a plus was virtually the same as an S, which makes sense in this diagram to me. So as value goes down, satisfaction goes down. They go in the same direction.
Well, that actually may be the case. Maybe I have talked myself into something that is not the case. And
But isn't that indicated by what you have? Does that not what a
well,
plus means?
what it indicates is that as value adds to customer satisfaction, if you create less value, it still adds to customer satisfaction, but not so much. Though, as I now think about it, maybe it's an inverse relationship. I have to think. I shouldn't do it here, though. What the question that he has raised means, I need to go think about it, and I'll post the answer on the discussion thread because is this a sufficient example of not getting it right the first time? Okay, I'm into Scott's time now. Thanks, Mike. I love you too. Have at it, Scott. Now that I have to go unscramble this egg.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Okay, thanks for that, Gene. Just a little more background on myself. So I developed Insight Maker, but before I developed Insight Maker, I developed another simulation program called SimGlow. So my different experiences with both of them have really shaped my thinking about modeling and software development. I've also done a lot of academic research on modeling and simulation. I just got my doctorate from UC Berkeley, so then some research there. Also outside the systematics field, so a lot of machine learning stuff too. So that's sort of my brief background, and I'm really excited to be here this afternoon talking to the participants to your course. And it took me a little bit of time to think about what I wanted to talk about when you gave me the invitation. I could teach how to use Insight Maker, but I think you're doing a great job of that already. I could talk about the Insight Maker technology and how it works internally, but that would probably be very boring for your audience in large. And primarily I wanted to talk about something that was about Insight Maker, but was also applicable to modeling more generally. So I eventually came up with this topic, which you're showing on the screen right here, the 3 principles of modern software design, which also apply to modeling. So I came up with 3 sort of key ideas, which are very important when developing and implementing software programs like Insight Maker, but can also be applied to modeling. So they're also valuable to consider when you're working on building a model. So those 3 principles in brief are agility, and developing your model or software very quickly, iterating on it, and improving it over time. The second one is integration and leverage, utilizing existing software, utilizing existing tools, and leveraging what's already out there. And the third one is transparency and openness, making sure your software or your model is as transparent as possible and open to others to use and understand. So there are the 3 key principles right there. So I'm going to go through them one by one. Let's start off with agility. Thank you, Gene, for going to that slide. And so nowadays, or maybe for the past 5 years or so, the term agile has been a big buzzword in software development. It's an approach to project management or software development that focuses primarily on getting a working product out as quickly as possible. So as fast as you can get sort of the bare minimum of what you need to implement your software program or your target goals, and then iterate on that product. So your first version is going to be pretty bad, but then you rapidly iterate on it, improve it, fix issues, and move it towards a high-quality product. And that's sort of in contrast to the more traditional approach to project management typified by, for instance, the waterfall chart, where you spend a lot of upfront time designing, planning, identifying the key objectives and how you're going to meet them, determining the needed resources, needed manpower, et cetera, to implement your goal. So there are very different approaches to developing software. And nowadays, I think the agile approach is much more effective, and it's good both for software development and also modeling. So my experience in this is when I mentioned that I developed before Insight Maker a simulation modeling package called SimGua. And when I developed SimGua, I had several big ideas of what SimGua would do that was really different than what anyone else was doing at the time. And these sort of big ideas I thought would be really transformative and really empowering and make SimGua very successful. So I spent a lot of time working on SimGua, designing it, building it, implementing those features. Then when I went to release it, I found out that those, what I thought would be these big transformative features, turned out to not be very important for people. They didn't resonate, they didn't connect, they didn't have any impact. They didn't have the impact I wanted them to have. So that's sort of the risk of a more traditional approach to developing software. You spend a lot of time on something you think will be important, only to find out at the end of the day that actually isn't very important to other people. So when I developed Insight Maker, I took a very different approach. The goal was just to get something up and running as fast as possible. Get something that ran online, let you build models and run simulations. Just get that sort of bare product as quickly as possible. And the first version of Insight Maker was quite bad, very limited, buggy, hard to use, but then I iterated on it, steadily improving it, which I'm still doing to this day. So that was a very different approach to development, and in many ways it's much more effective because developing Insight Maker it really evolved over time in response to users' needs rather to my big ideas. So things like rich pictures or agent-based modeling are things that I didn't ever plan to add to Insight Maker, but people found a need for it and wanted more of those types of features, so I grew into that area. So very different approaches to software development. As I said, I'm very in favor of this agile approach these days, and I think we can also apply it a lot to modeling. So for modeling, we also have two approaches. One approach, we can spend a lot of time planning our models, surveying people, getting data, figuring out what needs to go into the model, how the model should be designed. And that's sort of the more traditional approach. The other way, we can try to just get something up and running as quickly as possible. What's the key question we're trying to answer, and develop the most simple possible model imaginable to answer that key question. Of course, this most simple model will be very limited, it won't be very persuasive, but we can then iterate on it. We can then improve it, we can share with our colleagues, see what resonates with them, extend those features, etc., and adapt it over time. So I think this agile approach to software development is very applicable to modeling, and I think it's something that can be very effective when you approach a task in modeling. Rather than sort of planning and spending a lot of time outlining or mapping your model, just jump right in and get something working and then iterate on that basic initial model. Okay, so that's the first point I want to discuss. The second one is integration / leverage. So this is the idea that we should be leveraging and integrating with existing technologies. And to be honest, right now is a very, very exciting time in software development. With the rise of web technologies, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, etc., it's really a fascinating time where a lot of new things are becoming possible that weren't really possible 10 years ago. The idea that I can write something like Insight Maker and have it run on Macintosh, run on Linux, run on Windows, run on your iPhone, run on your iPad, just by writing this one piece of software once, it runs on all these different platforms. I mean, that's incredibly valuable, and it just wasn't possible 10 years ago. So it's really, really exciting, these technologies. And as they develop, there's also this really rich community of an ecosystem of software packages and technologies that you can leverage running on this stack, this web stack, HTML, JavaScript, CSS, to extend your programs. And these include both free and open source software, but also a lot of commercial programs. And by leveraging these softwares, you can really accelerate your development of your software package. So Insight Maker uses a lot of open source and commercial software, uses a great library called xRev for graphing, uses a great toolkit called XJS, maybe a half dozen or so other tools. And without the existence of these tools, it would be completely impossible for one person to write that complex piece of software. But using these tools, it is possible. So it's pretty sort of transformative and enabling the sort of ecosystem available of tools. So I think these days you really don't want to be an island in software development. You want to leverage existing tools as much as possible because there's just such a rich and powerful ecosystem of tools out there. And I think this is relevant in terms of modeling for two factors. The first factor is that I think it's important we try to be aware of the different types of modeling out there. So we all know the saying, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So if you only know one type of modeling, you're going to try to apply that to everything. First, you only know system dynamics, any problem you're going to be trying to find feedback loops in it. And sometimes you'll be using the right tool, but sometimes you'll be using a poor tool for the job. So I think it's important to be aware and understand the different technologies out there and really try to integrate them as applicable for a given task. Maybe one modeling problem, you could use some system technologies, but another part of that same problem, you might want to use some sort of machine learning type technique. So I think it's important to be aware of the different techniques, see how they fit together, and try to integrate them as needed. And the second aspect of leveraging existing tools, and this is something I feel we haven't succeeded at yet as a community or researchers, is the idea of leveraging different pieces of models. So I was working on a model of a college, and it would be great in this model of the college if there was an existing sort of student object that I could just drop into my model. Someone else built a student, why can't I reuse that student in my model? And that's not really possible right now. It's also a very, very difficult challenge. It's something I thought a lot about how to do that. I haven't come up with the way to solve that challenge. Other software packages have also attempted it. I don't think they've solved it either. But I feel like as a community we should really be trying to solve the issue of model reuse and the idea of creating different modules or different packages that you can drag and drop between models and reuse different components and different logic in different systems. Again, that's a very, very difficult problem to do in practice, but I think it's something we should be striving for. Okay, the third area of key principle I have is transparency and openness. So I think we're really, as a software community, we're really moving towards more and more open software. You have a lot of big companies releasing large chunks of open source code. Google, Microsoft has just released a huge amount of their .NET framework as open source. You have companies like Apple devoting a large amount of engineering time and money to supporting and contributing to open source products. So we're sort of moving towards this open world where a lot of the key technology people use is actually open source that anyone can look at and anyone can use. And this is also accelerated, of course, by the internet, where if you go to a web page, you can inspect how that page was built. You can look at the source code they're running. It's right there. You can see the functions they're using. You can see the logic. You can replicate it. So the idea of sort of closed, secret black box applications is slowly going away, I believe. And I think this is very important for, of course, simulation and modeling, because just simulation modeling programs, it's very important that you know they're working correctly. If you're using a black box type program, you can never really be sure whether it's accurate or not. You can't really dig into the internals. So I think for simulation and modeling, we definitely want to be moving that direction even faster than anyone else. So Insight Maker is, of course, open source. You can go on GitHub, download the entire source code, see how it's implemented, modify it, run your own copy if you want. Use open file format, XML, open file format that is easy to interpret, people prefer to use. So Insight Maker is definitely embracing the idea of openness and transparency. And I think this idea of openness and transparency is incredibly important for modeling. I think, personally, I really hate the idea of black box models. A model you can't look into, a model you can't understand, you can't inspect. And we have black box models through lots of mechanisms. One mechanism might be the logic of the model is proprietary. So someone developed a model, they're trying to sell it or use it part of the consulting business, so they don't want to release the internals. So you don't know what's going on in that model. You just have their word on it. Another cause of black box models are poor documentation. And you see this a lot in academic papers and research where you have a paper on a model, the model is supposedly documented in that paper, but key components of it are missing. They just don't. They forgot to include an equation, or there's something else missing from the model that, although it's mostly documented, it's impossible to completely reproduce their work, given what they published. And the third case that can lead to black box models are models that are actually published in their entirety. So maybe you have their source code or something else. You can look in and see how exactly they're implemented. But it's very difficult to understand. And there might be a very complex logic that's not adequately documented. So even though you have everything you need to replicate it, it's just too hard to understand what's actually going on. So I think we need to, when modeling, we should strive as much as possible to move away from these types of categories. We should have our models be as open and understandable as possible. I think it's so important that when you publish a model or share a model, that model be critiquable. Your end user should be able to look at it and raise issues they see with it. If they don't understand it well enough that they can raise that issue, I think that's a major problem. And especially as users of models, I think it's very important that whenever we use a model, we understand it well enough that we can critique it. If we don't understand the model, then it's just very risky to use. There could be lots of assumptions, lots of issues in it that if we don't understand it, we can't identify or we can't address. So I think the idea of transparency is really key towards modeling. And this is one of the reasons I really like system dynamics, is that to some extent the structure of system dynamics enforces a level of transparency that's often not seen in other types of modeling. So that's one reason why I really like this technique. And I really enjoy working with system dynamics models. Okay, so those are my 3 key principles. Just recap: agility, integration and leverage, and then transparency and openness. If there are a few questions, I'm happy to stay a few more minutes and answer them. Hello?
Everyone is spellbound, Scott.
Oh, okay. Hope I didn't put them to sleep.
No, I don't think you put them to sleep. Though there don't seem to be any questions. So if some show up, I'll get back to you and we'll see if you we can get answers from you about.
Great. Well, thanks, Gene. It's been a pleasure chatting.
Would you mention a few words about the investment that you have made in the development of Insight Maker and simply giving it away to the world?
So yeah, and this might be insanity, but I'm the type of guy who I get my teeth in a problem and I really want to solve it. So Insight Maker was the idea of having simulation modeling run in the browser, so it's effortless for you to share your models, spread your ideas, and communicate with people better, which is sort of an entrancing idea for me. So something, again, I started small with this sort of agile, let's get something up and running. But then once it's there, I'm the type of guy who is not so happy with imperfection. So I want to spend the time on improving it, and I see a problem, and I can't let it go. I have to fix it. So in some ways, it's a little bit of an obsession, but it's an incredibly rewarding one. Just seeing what people have built with it is really amazing. Very rewarding overall.
So the question from Mike Blackstone is, how do you pay your bills?
So right now I work at Google, so that's my day job, and it provides some enough time on the weekend or whatever to keep improving Insight Maker.
And until now, you've been a student for the last 15 years.
Yep, so for the past 4 years, I've been working my doctorate at UC Berkeley. So I had some money from the NSF during that period to work on Insight Maker and do my doctorate.
Okay. There's also a question about that. You indicate that planning in Agile is not important. Actually, planning is important, just needs to be structured differently.
Yeah, that's true. I'm not by any means expert in project management. Sort of my book I think is really great is called The Lean Startup, and I'm trying to remember, oh, the author is Eric Ries. And again, the book is called The Lean Startup. And I'm sort of conflating the idea of Agile with some other similar ideas when I'm talking. But really, that sort of book is sort of my guide. And he has this lovely idea of this minimum viable product. That when you have some idea, like Insight Maker or whatever you want to build, you should identify the minimum viable product. So the smallest, simplest product that achieves your key goals. And then just build that simple initial thing. And then validate it, see if it works, run it by people, see if it connects with them or not. And I think that's very true for modeling too. This idea of, well, not in the case of modeling, it wouldn't be a minimum viable product. It would be, I guess, a minimum viable model, MVM. So identify the smallest, simplest model that addresses your key issues and then implement it. So that's sort of my view. And again, I am conflating things when I'm talking about Agile with other things. But I just want to draw that two distinctions to try to make it clearer, more understandable.
Okay. Bob's interested in what kind of work you do with Google.
So I work with AdWords. So AdWords is Google's advertising platform. When you search for something on Google, you see these little ads next to it. That's AdWords right there. And our team works with small and medium businesses who are clients of AdWords and buy ads with Google. And we work with modeling the customers, modeling the support people who call these customers for some different services, looking at what's working, what's not working, how we can increase revenue while also, of course, keeping customers happy.
And Judy indicates that she really likes the way that you talk about agility and planning. Though, what do you do when you run into a customer that wants old-fashioned project management plans?
I do not know. I don't have experience with that. I'm sure someone else can talk more on that. Yeah, you got to do what you got to do. But of course, there's a lot of risk with that. I mean, you're going to get something done. What I really feel is sort of these, the more you plan, so the more certain you're going to get something done, but the more likely it's going to be mediocre. So if you sort of do this agile, see the panting, it can be amazing, or it can sort of really flame out. While if you sort of spend a lot of time planning and go through all that, I think it decreases the variability of results, but lowers the ultimate average outcome. So reducing variability, but also resulting in more mediocrity. That's sort of my view on it.
And Michael's comment is convince the client that Agile is cheaper and they get a minimum viable product faster.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
Okay. All right, sir. Well, you have a good rest of your day, and we'll sort of close up shop here in a minute or two. And
thank you, Ting. It's been a pleasure talking with everyone. Have a good day.
Bye. Okay, so we've got a few minutes left. If there are any additional questions about Insight Maker that I could address in a few minutes before we wrap up today. Okay. If questions come to mind, please post them to the discussion forum for this particular segment, and I will do my best to answer them, and I will go noodle the situation with the business and its customer, and I will post a response in the discussion forum and on the element that in the content where that is right here. I'll put a note in here and post an explanation that I come up with, and if needs be, we can discuss it back and forth to whatever extent we need to till it makes sense to all of us. So if there aren't any other questions, thank you very much. I hope you found the session interesting and meaningful, and we'll continue on. Take care, all. And thank you much, Marcia. Most helpful.